Hey guys, welcome to our first episode of our new season of Artcast. I'm Xavier.
I'm Charlotte Xavier, and I'm really happy that we get to start a brand new season.
I'm Grace DeBoita, and I originally planned to retire from this series, but I eventually changed my mind, so now I'm back.
I'm Kaleb. I'm just a new member here, so glad to be here.
Yeah, we would like to welcome Kaleb to our season 2 to our casting crew. So welcome, Kaleb. And today we're here with our very special guest, Desmond Blair. Thank you so much for joining us.
How are y'all doing?
Good. How about yourself?
Doing pretty good.
So why don't you introduce yourself? Like, just tell us about who you are and why you became an artist.
Okay, so my name is Desmond. I am from Dallas, born and raised. Grew up here. I went to UTD for undergrad and graduate school. Graduated from their ATech program. And how I became an artist is like a very long story, but to kind of sum it up and condense it, basically I was learning how to write so I could go to school. And in doing that and figuring out how to do that, I don't know, I just started coloring, then went from coloring to tracing to drawing to painting, doing other things, and just kind of went from there.
That's awesome. That's cool. Well, he basically answered my first question. So whoever's next.
I want to say, what motivates you to keep painting?
What motivates me to keep painting? I think at this point, I guess where I am right now as an artist, just realizing that there's an opportunity, I think, for me to, because it never made sense. It's like the guy with no hands, he wants to be an artist, right? Like growing up, like you would tell people that, and even now I tell people that, and they're like, do you do like abstract art? And it's like, no, I like painting portraits. But I think there's an opportunity there to kind of challenge what people expect, not only from people with limb differences, but just in general. Because a lot of times, like, you think about how many limitations like we place on ourselves. And so I think at this point in my career as an artist, my goal is to just kind of do as much as I can to make a statement to, like, not only challenge myself, but challenge what others think they're capable of.
Yeah.
And in the long run, maybe use my art for like philanthropy purposes.
That's awesome.
So.
All right. So my question was, do you have like a piece you're most proud of, like out of all of the works you've made?
Yes, I do. But I sold it.
Oh.
It was one of my earlier works, but it's a picture of this model. She has a hood on, and I wasn't expecting to sell it, but I needed supplies.
Yeah, I feel that.
It's like a never-ending like struggle. Do you keep stuff? Do you sell it? But I sold it to a lady, and it found a good home.
That's awesome.
Oh, my turn. Okay. Right. So here's it's maybe a bit confusing, but what do you think are the essential elements of painting?
The essential elements of painting?
Yeah, like elements of art, principles of design. Yeah.
For me, it's always like I always think about positive and negative space. Mm-hmm. And so not only with where how you compose the like figure in the background, mm-hmm. but then also the things that happen while you're painting. So like light, it creates shapes. Mm-hmm. And that's what I tend to focus on when I'm painting portraits, is the shapes or the things that are going on with the light. So kind of like you have the positive and negative space with the figure in the background, but then you have all these other things going on as you're working through the painting. So that, and then color. I started out, most of my paintings were kind of like monochromatic or a little darker, and I think over the past couple of years I've been trying to introduce more color into my work, like brighter colors and things like that, which for me, you get used to doing one thing and you kind of want to stay there, but for me it's been challenging because it's like okay, I'm gonna throw some yellow in this paint, and yellow is like one of those colors. It can make or break. You know, too much of it, you know, can be overpowering. But just doing stuff like that to kind of challenge the way I'm thinking about what I'm doing, and then how to make stuff come together.
So my next question is like, how do you know who you're gonna paint? Like, how do you figure it? Does someone like contact you like, oh, I want to paint you, or do you just find someone that you like? And
So, I'm gonna date myself here, but back when I was in high school, we used to get these like books that had nothing but like photo. I think it's like stock photography before it was like online. And so I used to go through those books, and even in college I did too. But now we got like Instagram and stuff. So
yeah.
sometimes it's music, or like if I find an artist and I kind of dial into them, then I end up painting them. Or sometimes like, you know, it's somebody I know, or you just see something and it's like, okay, if I took this, painted it this size, maybe did this, tweaked this, turned the knobs here and there, like you could take it and turn it into like a really nice painting. So, but ultimately, I think even with making those decisions, it all comes down to a feeling. Because once you put there's a difference between painting a portrait and taking a photograph, right?
Yeah.
So for me, when you paint someone, you have to like place some sort of emotion in the painting, and I think that I try to do that with my brush strokes.
Yeah.
So finding something that will translate into a painting, but also you can use it with the way you do stuff to convey that emotion.
Okay.
So,
Have you ever had a moment of doubt?
have I ever had a moment of doubt? All the time. Those don't go away as you get older. But I think my biggest one, so I went to college and undergrad for 2D animation. I was dead set on doing that. And I ran into this, I had this class project where I had to draw like 300 frames, clean them up from the guy that was like pencil testing them. And like I did it like 3 or 4 times, and every time I would shoot it, my lines were like wobbling. Now, eventually, after about 3 or 4 weeks, I finally got it right, figured out a way to do it. But I think that was probably one of the times where I was really kind of like, I don't know if I can do this. Because it's like every night, it's like you get home, class, work, and then it's like I'm up to 3 a.m. And it was a baby too. It's like animating a baby, like rocking like side to side. But you still run into those moments, and I think even as I got more into painting, like you still question, well, there's this person out there, and there's this person doing this, but then you have to find ways to like give yourself grace and understand that you're gonna grow and develop in your own way. Just like we all have like fingerprints, even though I don't have fingers. But we all have fingerprints. Each one of those is different. So what you bring to the table as a creative or as an artist, it's going to be you. And you have to allow you to develop in the way that you are supposed to develop, and not let it necessarily be dictated by someone else. So.
My question is there anything or anyone that inspires your work, like that you do?
Anything or anyone. Favorite artists, Salvador Dali, Giacometti, and then the rest of them are a lot of comic book artists, so Joe Madureira, Bill Watterson, Calvin and Hobbes, Charles Schultz, Snoopy, 2 Disney animators, Frank and Ollie. So it's kind of like all over the place. But then just personally, I think it's finding ways to tell people stories or tell a story about someone in a painting. And that's why I paint musicians sometimes, because it's like, okay, if I'm listening to what they're doing, there's some kind of feeling or mood, you know, there, and I want to try to like capture it. So, but if anything, the thing that inspires me to paint portraits or paint people is just trying to tell a story like in a snapshot.
Okay.
Okay, so So, how can you give each of your paintings a purpose?
How can I give each of my paintings a purpose? That's a hard question to answer.
I'm sorry.
Like how do we make meaning out of our work?
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah. So, and I get where you're going with that. I think each one for me is indicative of, I tell on myself. So like what I'm feeling or like my emotional state or whatever. Because I remember there's this one, this is another one of my favorite paintings. What was it called? Sunshine and Bubblegum. And like before I even painted the picture, I was like pink and yellow, pink and yellow, pink and yellow. And granted, it was like June, July or something like that. There's a lot, this is before the pandemic, so we could actually go places, summertime. And I just had those two colors in my head for like a week or whatever. And it came out, you know, or manifested itself in a painting or a portrait or whatever. And I think a lot of times for me, like the purpose or meaning is just they capture the emotional state of where I'm at, even the way I use my brushes and stuff. Kind of like telling myself. So.
What do you think is like your painting style? Do you think you have like your own like style, or do you like rub off on somebody else?
I definitely found out over the past summer that I rub off on my daughter.
Oh.
You don't realize that they pay attention to what you're doing. But I think for me, definitely, I've been influenced by like comic book art.
Right.
Because before I even started using oil paints, it was like Prismacolor, marker, pencil, pen. And so with the way that I use the paint, mix the paint, thin the paint, and blend, is kind of like the same thing. Like in my mind, I'm like using markers instead of paint.
Yeah, that's cool.
Where do you see yourself in the next 5 to 10 years?
Next 5 years, hopefully my own annual kind of like art show, fundraiser, gala thing.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I start off with my own work, but then find a way to like feature or bring other artists into the fold.
Right.
Again, I want to be able to use my artistic ability for the sake of philanthropy, to be able to help people. So somewhere, in some sort of way, finding a way to create some sort of show, event, gala, something like that, that drives toward that cause.
Right.
And then ultimately, I don't know, 10 years from now, college professor, and then just going all over the place, like painting stuff, doing classes, hanging out, learning, showing in different cities and stuff like that.
Okay.
So.
I believe we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier. What was like the process for you teaching yourself how to paint?
So, teaching myself how to paint, well, just learning how to like draw, period. So I started out, again, I was learning how to write so I could go to school. My grandmother, I was raised by my mom and my grandma, but my grandma came up with this idea to use like coloring books. So she was like, if you can learn how to color, then you should be able to write. And so without having, or me not having hands, like we tried different things, like using my feet, my mouth, you know, just a bunch of different things. And then I finally learned how to use both of my hands to like scribble. So after that, it was just a bunch of repetition, and she would make me color. This was before I started school, until I could like finish the coloring book she would buy for me, front to back, no mistakes. And so through doing that, that's how I learned how to hold stuff. But then I think when I was like in 5th or 6th grade, I found like Bob Ross. And so very early, I would sit there and try to paint the landscapes with them, and that's just how I got started with actually painting.
Right. So, do you believe you have mastered your own style in painting, or not yet?
I don't think you can ever really master like what you do, because it'll evolve. I think the more you do it, it'll change. You see things, you see colors, you experience things that ultimately I think trickle down into your work. So I think if anything, you just kind of go through phases, and there's this like continuous evolution until, this is gonna sound morbid, I think you're no longer here, but I don't think you ever really like master it. You get some things nailed down to where it's like, okay, I know which brush to use here, what to do there, but you still have to give yourself space to change and grow. So.
How do you seek out opportunities?
How do I seek out opportunities? Oh my goodness. Oh. Okay. How do I seek out opportunities? For me, at first, especially when I really got back into painting, I was afraid to like show anybody my stuff.
Yeah.
And I had one of my professors at the time. He was just like, just put it out there, let people see it, you know.
Yeah.
And so finding ways to get connected in the local like arts community, like different organizations to get connected with, meeting other artists, learning, going to workshops, and just doing like collaborative shows and stuff like that. I think those eventually started to open more doors. But the first step was just like not being afraid of where you are.
Yeah.